Welcome back to Uncorking the Issues, where we pour clarity into Temecula Valley politics. I'm your host, Grapevine. Today's episode is titled Recognition, Reality, and the $5,000 Question. We are discussing the April 16, 2026 Temecula Valley Unified School District School Board meeting. It was one of those nights where you see both the best and the tension inside a district of the same room, sometimes just minutes apart. And if you want to understand what's really happening in Temecula Valley schools right now, this meeting tells you a lot. Let's start where the meeting started, with recognition, because this part matters. The district opened by highlighting students and programs that are working. And these weren't surface-level shout-outs. These were real, personal stories. You had a preschool student, Luca, just 4 years old, navigating a general education classroom with multiple supports, showing confidence, positivity, and a willingness to advocate for himself. You had elementary student Jocelyn, who went from struggling with communication and connection to actively engaging with peers, making them laugh, and showing empathy when others were upset. At the middle school level, Owen was recognized for transitioning successfully into general education, developing independence, and becoming a leader in the classroom. At the high school level, you had JJ, consistent, respectful, resilient, reaching the highest level in his program and moving into ROTC. And Jeremy, whose story likely hit the hardest, started off shy, withdrawn, even guarded, and through support and persistence developed confidence, leadership skills, and a clear vision for his future. That's the system working. That's what teachers, aides, specialists, and programs can do when things are aligned. And for a moment, the room felt unified around that. But that moment didn't last, because after recognition comes public comment. And that's where a very different picture started to emerge. You began hearing from educators and staff, and the tone shifted quickly. Teachers spoke about compensation, specifically the lack of meaningful raises compared to surrounding districts. They talked about decisions being made without collaboration. One speaker pointed out that neighboring districts had secured stronger multi-year increases, while Temecula educators were still sitting at minimal gains. And then came a line that should get attention from anyone watching closely. There was talk about moving toward strike-level readiness. That's not casual language. That's escalation language. At the same time, classified staff, the people who keep schools running behind the scenes, spoke about working conditions, not in abstract terms, but very real ones. Unsafe situations, difficult environments, a sense that essential staff weren't being supported the way they should be. And underneath all of it, one theme kept coming back: resources, money, priorities. Which brings us to the moment that quietly became the center of the night. A $5,000 item. On paper, it looks small, almost insignificant in a district budget. A membership fee to the Inland Personnel Council, IPC. The description: training, support, personnel-related guidance. But once it was brought into the open, the questions started stacking up. Community members asked, what exactly is IPC? What are we getting for this money? Has the board even reviewed this recently? Is this contract automatically renewing without transparency? And maybe the most important question, what problem does this actually solve? Because when people hear we don't have enough money for raises, for programs, for improvements, and then see money going somewhere unclear, that's when trust starts to erode. David Sola broke it down in practical terms. $5,000 could go toward classroom supplies, mental health support, technology upgrades, student programs, things people can see and feel immediately. And instead, it's going to something most people in the room didn't fully understand. Then the issue got more complicated because it wasn't just about a membership. It was about structure. There were concerns raised that IPC is tied to the district's legal firm, Atkinson Andelson, Loya, Root, and Romo, known as AALRR, which raises a governance question. If the same firm is advising, training, and potentially influencing policy across districts, are those roles clearly separated, or are they blurred? That's not political spin. That's a legitimate governance concern. And then came another surprise. Some board members indicated they weren't even aware of when this had last been formally reviewed. There were references to the agreement potentially going back years, even over a decade, with automatic renewals built in. So now, the issue isn't just money, it's oversight, it's process, it's accountability. And this is where the meeting took a turn. Melinda Anderson brought the item forward, not to approve it, but to stop it. She questioned the lack of clarity. She raised concerns about compliance with education code around auto renewals. She pointed out the absence of clear board review in recent years, and she made a motion: do not renew the IPC contract. Pause it, step back, reevaluate. The vote came quickly, 3-2, and just like that, the contract was not renewed. But what happened next may have been even more important, because while the board agreed to step away from IPC, they did not agree to cut ties with AALRR. And that split decision reveals how differently board members are approaching risk and accountability. One board member pushed further. They argued that if IPC and AALRR are connected, then stepping away from IPC might not be enough. Their position was simple. If there's a potential conflict, remove it completely. They proposed terminating the district's relationship with AALRR. That motion did not pass, and the reasons why matter. Several board members made it clear they wanted to separate the two issues. From their perspective, IPC raised transparency and governance concerns, but AALRR, as a law firm, still provides necessary legal services, and those services are not optional. School districts rely on legal counsel for special education compliance, labor negotiations, contracts, liability, and litigation.
Cutting ties with a firm like AALRR isn't just symbolic. It has real operational consequences.
There was also a trust factor. Some board members expressed confidence in the attorneys currently serving the district. They acknowledged concerns about IPC, but didn't see enough evidence in that moment to justify ending the broader legal relationship. And then there's process. The motion to terminate AALRR came quickly. During a discussion that was originally about IPC, at least one board member pushed back, essentially saying, this is too big of a decision to make without proper review, context, and due diligence, because ending a legal services contract typically requires evaluation, alternatives, transition planning, and risk assessment. None of that had been fully laid out, so the result was a split approach. Yes, step away from IPC. No, not ready to walk away from AALRR, at least not tonight. And that decision highlights something important. This board is not operating as a single block. There are different thresholds for action, different interpretations of risk, different levels of urgency. Some members are clearly in a clean break mindset. If there's a potential conflict, remove it entirely. Others are taking a more surgical approach. Address the specific issue, but don't disrupt systems that are still functioning. Neither approach is inherently right or wrong, but the tension between them is shaping decisions in real time, and going forward, that tension will matter. Because if further scrutiny reveals deeper issues, the question of AALRR may come back. But for now, the line has been drawn. IPC is out. AALRR stays. Now here's why this matters beyond one vote. What you saw in that moment was a collision of two realities. On one side, students succeeding, programs working, real growth happening. On the other side, staff frustration, budget tension, questions about transparency and decision-making. And when those two realities exist at the same time, you get friction. That friction showed up in this meeting, and it's likely not going away anytime soon. Because the underlying issue isn't IPC, it's alignment. Do staff feel heard? Do decisions reflect stated priorities? Is spending transparent and clearly justified? Are governance structures clean and accountable? Those are the questions that will keep coming up. And here's the bigger pattern to watch. Temecula Valley isn't struggling with outcomes. Students are achieving, programs are producing results. But internally, there are signs of strain between leadership and staff, between budget messaging and spending decisions, between what's said publicly and what's understood behind the scenes. And when those gaps widen, even small items become major issues because they represent something bigger. They become symbols of trust or lack of it. Now layer that on top of something else already hanging over this board, the censure of Emil Barham. Because if you want to understand the dynamics here, you can't ignore that. Censure is supposed to be about accountability, a formal statement that a member crossed a line. But in a divided board, it rarely feels that clean. Because here's the reality. Some people see censure and think, finally, standards matter. Others see it and think, this is what happens when you don't fall in line. And once that perception sets in, everything gets filtered through it, every vote, every disagreement, every decision, including this one. So now you don't just have a disagreement about contracts, you have competing philosophies about power, accountability, and control. And it's all playing out in public. Here's the bigger picture. Students are doing well, programs are working, that part is real. But governance, that's where things get messy. You've got staff frustration, budget tension, questions about transparency, and a board that clearly does not see the world the same way. And when that happens, even a $5,000 decision becomes a referendum on trust. So what did we actually learn tonight? We learned that the system can produce incredible outcomes, and at the same time, struggle with how decisions are made at the top. We learned that accountability is selective, that action has limits, and that alignment is still very much a work in progress. And until that alignment shows up in priorities, in process, and in how conflict is handled, expect more nights like this, more tension, more half measures, more moments where the adults in the room become the story. This has been Uncorking the Issues. I'm Grapevine. And remember, clarity isn't about picking sides. It's about recognizing when the glass isn't as clean as it looks.